My name is John Hart. Welcome back to the 2021 Protect Our Water Conference. I'm your moderator for this morning's session titled Communication, the Best Management Practice. Please use the Q&A section in the chat. If you go ahead and ask some questions in there that you have for Barry or for our presenter, it'll be really great. We won't have to wait till the end. But at the end of the presentation, I'll have a few minutes to forward some of those to Barry and have some answers to that. I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. It's my great pleasure to introduce Barry Fagan. Barry guides clients through the intersection of natural and built environments. He's done so for the last 30 years. He currently leads the Environmental and Infrastructure Group for Alabama-based Volcker, a national company, where he fulfills part of his personal mission of helping good people get better at managing stormwater. Before joining Volcker, Barry was the Alabama DOT Environmental Program Engineer, who he's with for well over 20 years. Please join me in welcoming Barry. Good morning, Barry. Take it over.
Hey, thank you, John. Hey, everyone. It's me again, and I'm kind of thinking back about this old guy that used to work with me at the Alabama DOT, and he had a saying for everything, and you probably have some of those characters there where you work. But one of his favorites was that he was so ugly you couldn't look at him all at once. You had to kind of take him in doses. So thank you. If you're coming back from our session earlier, I appreciate you coming back for another dose here. And I'll correct John, it's not the best management. Communication, the best management practice is communication, the best management practice. And so we're going to talk about that today. And we're talking about it in context with the 5 pillars of construction stormwater management, which I presented on those earlier, and I understand that not everyone was a part of that session that may be here today. So I'll give you a really quick rundown of those, kind of a refresher for those that were in that session, but also new stuff for those of you that may have missed it. So the 5 pillars of construction stormwater management, they're just a holistic, fundamental approach to managing construction stormwater that I've been utilizing for over the last 15 years. And I showed how this simple approach can reduce the inevitable risks that we run into associated with construction stormwater runoff, and how it can be, the 5 pillars can be applied to really any type of construction at any stage of construction. And it's an approach that's been adopted by several state DOTs and as they improve their programs, and other entities across the U.S. that I've had the opportunity to kind of preach it to. We talked about how the 5 pillars evolved backward from us seeing sediment as the problem to really a symptom of a bigger problem, and working our way backward and deciding that if we can keep that soil particle up here, we don't have to work so hard down there to capture it, and then getting beyond erosion and sediment control and looking really at the cause for that erosion, and adopting a mantra of clean water in and clean water out as we conveyed water that was running to our right of way, conveyed it under and over and around, and protected it as it went through, which reduced our workload to only those drops of sediment drops of rain that landed on our project. And we talked about how our contractors are capable and smart and innovative, and they can do just about anything we ask them to do, as long as we're willing to tell them up front, and we're willing to pay for it. But we have to tell them, and that's where the communication piece comes in as a part of these 5 pillars, and they're in order of effectiveness from most effective on the left to least effective on the right, but also least expensive on the left and most expensive on the right. And so they're in order of effectiveness and in order of economy. And so the managing communication part of those pillars. And if you did miss the 5 pillars talk and you want to hear more about it, the session was recorded, and I don't know exactly how to get back there to it, but it should be available to you. John also mentioned in the chat that there's a 5 pillars fact sheet that I forgot to mention during that previous session, but it's in VFairs, and I don't know how to get there, but it's somewhere in this conference program, And also, if you run into technical difficulties, just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to send it to you. So the way communication fits in, it's all of those things that we're doing to communicate information and expectations and priorities so that we can do a better job of managing construction stormwater and managing our programs. And so we're thinking about pre-bid and pre-construction meetings, weekly meetings, ad hoc meetings, specifications and plan notes and training and teaching and going to conferences. All of those things are about communication, and they're about making you and us better at what we do in terms of managing construction stormwater. And so we're going to dig in today. Of course, that was a really quick summary of the 5 pillars and where communication fits, but we're going to go beyond the 5 pillars in this session. We're going to go beyond the construction site even and take a deeper dive into that topic of that first pillar, communication, and hopefully at the end of the day, you'll be better able to convey your thoughts and your goals in ways that can be better heard and better understood on your projects and in your programs and even in your professional and personal lives. I truly believe that communication is the best management practice. I mentioned earlier that managing work was kind of my favorite. It is, but it's only because I'm not great at communicating oftentimes. And I'm a firm believer that communication is the best management practice, but that I do have to share with you, kind of put out there as a disclaimer and a note of honesty. The honest truth is I suck at communication most of the time. And if you don't believe me, talk to my wife. I avoid conflict like the plague, which makes it difficult to manage people sometimes. Sometimes I get nervous enough for my voice to shake. I'm feeling pretty comfortable right now, but that does still happen to me after hundreds of presentations. Sometimes I forget what I want to say. Sometimes even in one-on-one conversations with people I know, I'll get that bead of sweat running down my back, just kind of a nervous thing. And so part of my job is to get work. Of course, I do work and I help others to get work and do work. And I'm good with this kind of situation. Well, I'd rather be there in person, but I'm okay with this. But if you put me one-on-one on a cold call to tell somebody how good I am and why they should give me money to do their work, it's a really awkward thing. And it's kind of embarrassing to even think about it. And sometimes I stutter. Sometimes I don't say what I need to say in the moment. And then 10 minutes later, I say, man, this is what I should have said. And that works against me sometimes, but it's okay. That's simply who I am. And, sometimes at the end of a long day, in-person conference, or when I've been with people all day, I'll go home and my wife, after a while, she'll say, honey, you've used up all your words again, haven't you? And it's true. I just don't feel like talking anymore. And my oldest daughter is similar to that. We're both, I guess, kind of introverted, but we made a pact when she was probably in middle school. We agreed that even though we don't like to talk to people necessarily, it's not our favorite thing to do. We're smart enough and we both can learn a skill. And that's what I've been doing. And the reason I've done that is I realized that the things that I want to do and the things that I want to be good at and the person I want to be requires that I talk to people. And I don't know if you looked at my bio or were listening to John as he was introducing me, but I really enjoy my job. I've enjoyed my job for the last 20 something years. And in that bio, it talks about how Barry guides people at the intersection of natural and built environment, and Barry leads people, and he the group that I belong to, we have to work together as we support clients, and my personal mission is to help good people get better at whatever it is they want to do. And I enjoy those things, and I can't do any of those things if I can't communicate effectively, or at least I won't be as good as I want to be at those things if I can't communicate effectively. And so I feel like I shared a lot there. And so I don't even know who you are. So John, if you would pull up our first poll, I guess it's the only poll. I'd like to hear who you are and how you're connected to stormwater. And I hope these 4 options kind of capture everyone, but are you a construction project or inspector, could be a consultant or somebody else working for the DOT, contractor, a regulator, or someone else? And so just to give me an idea, this may help to flavor the rest of my talk as we go through. All right, John, what you got there?
We are just, well, we've got a lot coming in.
Okay. Oh, well, we
DOT,
got
DOT construction project manager or inspector is the biggest right now,
okay.
followed by
We've got
other and then
155
contractor.
people. I'm sorry, I talked over you. Say that again.
I said followed by other and then contractor.
Okay.
Very
So,
little regulators here, no regulators.
okay. So maybe we have some designers or managers or something else in that other category. And so thank you for sharing that
You bet.
with me. Now I know who I can and can't pick on as we go through this. So I worked the first couple of years for Volker solo. It was just me and trying to create a new service area. And then I hired 1 employee. And then for Christmas last year, my bosses gave me about 15 new employees, which is pretty exciting to me, but challenging also. Only 1 of my employees works in the same office that I do. The others are scattered across 3 states. And I think we're in about 6 offices now. And so you can imagine how coordinating and communicating can become a challenge. Those horizontal dotted lines across those bottom 2 rows, that indicates cross-discipline work and coordination. And our planning group, they may be helping out with the permitting and compliance, or our permitting and compliance folks, they may be inspecting on a job that our designers have designed. And so we've got those environmental planners, those are NEPA and environmental assessments and impact statements. Those are those folks. Our designers, those are our engineers designing stream restoration and wetland construction projects. And then our permitting and compliance folks, they're the ones with mud on their boots, and they're delineating wetlands and streams and mitigation work, 404 work, and of course, stormwater permitting and inspection also. And I do have 2 vacancies there if anybody's interested in coming to Alabama. But you can imagine the stress for somebody who values communication and sees the importance of communication. You can imagine the stress I was under trying to figure out how we're going to talk to each other in our group. And COVID really didn't matter to us because we were already remote, and it didn't matter to me if my group was working remotely in an office or remotely in their dining room. They were doing their jobs, and I was good with that. And so when I set out this year to kind of decide where my priorities were going to lie, where I wanted us to head as a group, I wanted to retain happy, and not necessarily happy, but satisfied, effective employees. And effectiveness, that's being effective is doing the right things. It's not just being billable and not just going through the motions. It's doing the things that need to be done. I'd been given this backlog and some fantastic clients, long-standing clients. I didn't want to lose a client, and I wanted our folks to grow. I wanted them to meet new people. I wanted them to try new things, and so growth was a big part of that. So those were our 3 key objectives and results, and I knew I could not get there without communication. And so some of the ways that I've tried to communicate, some of these work better than others work better on some people than other people. And my favorite is a one-on-one meeting. That's really hard if you're remote. And a one-on-one meeting is just a 30-minute meeting once a week, where a supervisor and a direct employee, they get together. The employee shares for about half the time, shares what they want to talk about, and then the supervisor talks about what they want to talk about, and then they're done. It's a way to tell your employee, I'm going to be here for you to talk about you and the things you want to talk about at least 30 minutes a week. So count on that. And that's one of the reasons I like it. We also have weekly leadership meetings, just me and those 3 managers. We have those at Tuesday at 1:30. And we chose that. We started out with, okay, Monday morning, we're going to get together Monday morning meetings are tough on anybody. There's just so many things going on, and I didn't want to distract them from the real work. So we tried Tuesday mornings and realized that all four of our personalities are such that we do our most effective work happens in the mornings. And so we landed on Tuesday at 1:30, and we get together and just catch up on projects and people and what's going on this week. What do we need for next week? Monthly billing meetings, that's kind of a mandatory thing to get our numbers right. And then we also have a quarterly all in where I bring the whole group together and we talk about our performance to date and for the quarter and what's happening next quarter. And my intent was that the employees within our group, they could kind of intermingle and cross-pollinate and build relationships with one another. That has not completely formed because of COVID. We've had a few virtual meetings and then one kind of partial, some virtual, some in person. And I'm hoping that our next meeting, we can all be there together. And then ad hoc calls and visits. I don't like picking up the phone and talking to anybody, much less, employees trying to, I guess, tap into their personal lives. But I've got an employee whose mother is dying right now. So I try to keep up with her pretty often. I've got an employee that just had a baby. I've got employees who entered their first CrossFit competition recently. And so I like to catch up and just make sure everybody's doing okay. And one of the ways that I can kind of tap into that is I ask them to do a survey for me every Friday. I'll send an email out and I may say, hey, I hope you had a good week, fill out your survey, have a good weekend, or I may share some information or request some information. But I created this survey and I expect it to take no more than 5 minutes. And it's just a window for me to look into their world. And the first thing I want to know is what's your stress level right now? Because I know that if a stressed out employee is not going to do their best work, they're going to possibly start slipping on deadlines, and that starts to affect the company. And those three areas that those three objectives, it's going to hurt them. They're not going to be happy. Our clients aren't going to be happy, and nobody's growing if we're all stressed out. And so I had to add the little graphic there for them to describe what a sweet spot is. And I think we've all experienced that, where we work hard and we go home at the end of the day and we're actually pumped up. We've actually we're tapping into our talent and our passions and our mission, and all that comes together. And I know what that feels like. It doesn't happen all the time, but that's why I'm curious. I want them to know that there is a sweet spot, and they need to be looking for it. I asked them what went well this week. Is there anything I can do? Anything that would help you to be more effective? One told me his boots were falling apart, and I had the opportunity to say, hey, go get you some new boots. You're out there in the swamp with your boot slipped or torn in half. Go get you some new boots. And share a few major objectives. So I don't want everybody coming in the morning on Monday and deciding, hey, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do for the rest of the week? Let's go ahead and think about that, at least as we're in the middle of the work at the end of the week. And then finally, how many hours did you work this week really? So that's, tell me the truth. How many hours are you putting in? And for our folks, they will put in more hours than they actually report on their time cards. And I don't like that. I don't want them overworking themselves. And it goes back kind of the stress level. We start to slip in our quality, our deadlines start to slip, and that results in an unhappy client if we're not careful, and certainly an unhappy employee. So I tell them, anything over 45 hours, we need to start watching ourselves and pulling back if we can. Sometimes it's necessary, and I get it, and we do it, and I ask for it, and that happens. But ideally, we want to stick to 40 to 45 hours. So that's a lot. That's a lot, but I think there's a lot at stake when it comes to communication and keeping up with our people. John mentioned earlier to me that the Oklahoma DOT is kind of going all virtual, and I think I understood from now on. And it makes me wonder, how are they going to keep up with their coordination and communication with one another? And I hope they have some tools in place. I read a book a few years ago called Awesomely Simple. It was by John Spence, and he's a business consultant who's studied thousands of businesses and business leaders. And he said that he talks about what happens when organizations lack open, honest, robust, and courageous communication. And he found that the four biggest issues for those business leaders are a lack of a well-communicated vision, lack of courageous communication, toleration of mediocrity due to the lack of communication, and poor execution of key plans and ideas also due to the lack of communication. And so they're all related to communication. It seems like most problems that we have on our projects, in our programs, in our organizations, they're all due to a lack of communication in some form or fashion. And really how well we communicate or don't communicate, it usually comes down to trust. Trust influences the outcomes, trust influences our leadership, and trust promotes understanding and grace, which we all need, particularly in our world of construction stormwater management, where we don't get to control any of the variables that can sink us, or most of the variables that can sink us. Weather, rain, the soils, the space, the regulator, we don't control any of those things. So we need understanding and grace when things go wrong. And so back to our key objectives: employee effectiveness, that requires trust; client satisfaction, that requires trust; growth requires trust, which by the way, that requires growth. We've got to grow in order to be able to trust people, but then that trust, that helps us to grow even further. Dr. John Maxwell, he says that leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And I learned a long time ago that dealing with environmental advocacy groups, that it's really hard to influence someone that you're not willing to hang out with. It's easy to stay over here and throw rocks across the fence, but if you want to influence that person, if you want them to see your perspective and your point of view, you're going to have to talk to them. You're going to have to hang out with them to an extent. And so we can't influence people without trust, and we can't influence people without communication. And so my goal for myself, whether it's technically or in this area of communication, is to get better every day. I don't expect that I'll be perfect. I don't expect that my employees will be perfect. And actually I've learned that there's not anyone on the planet that matters that expects you to be perfect. But there is an expectation that we get better. The Clean Water Act, it lays out some goals and some expectations and expectations of you and I, that we get better at what we do, so that one day we'll reach those goals, and the quality of our nation's waters will be restored. But we've got to keep getting better every day, and that, I think, is an expectation. But also, when you show that you're willing to get better every day, it shows that your heart's in the right place. It shows that you care about some of the things that others who may be throwing rocks at you, they care about. And it kind of brings a bit of humanity to the situation when you show that your heart's in the right place and that you're trying. But we know that trust doesn't come automatically, and we're not automatically seen as trustworthy, and others aren't always seen as trustworthy to us immediately. And when I say trustworthy, that just means that someone is worthy of my trust. And I get to decide that, and you get to decide that. And it usually involves kind of a process. We start with some form of communication. We bump into each other in some form or fashion. That if it develops further, it develops into a connection that might develop into some level of relationship. And then that's when we start to get to trust. Now, we can trust automatically, which is fine. And actually, I've noticed that with myself, when I am cynical, even when I'm skeptical, I start to become hard of hearing. I can't hear everything you say if I'm skeptical of your motives. But when I get to the point of being cynical, I've already made up my mind, and I'm deaf. And my ears are closed, my mind is closed, and I already know what you're about and what you're going to do. And so I try my best to not be cynical, and I also measure my skepticism as much as I can as a human. I think we all might struggle with that at some point. So that's kind of the why of communication, why it's important, why we need to be focusing on communication as the best management practice. So now let's talk about the what. What does effective communication look like? And effective communication is one of those things that it's more obvious when it's missing than when it's there. When you're effectively communicating, you think, hey, we're just getting along, we're clicking. But there's actually a process happening there, and effective communication happens when an intended message is received by the intended receiver. And so the components there, you've got a sender, you've got a message, not just any message, but the intended message. We've all sent unintended messages before. There's some sort of medium there that to a forum to get your message across. And then there's a receiver, hopefully the intended receiver. We've all also sent messages to the wrong person unintentionally also. And so successful communication is when the intended message reaches the intended receiver. And ideally there's some sort of feedback that communicates that the receiver understood, they heard you, and they understand. And I try to be a good listener in my interactions. And if you tell me something, I might just say, okay, here's what I'm hearing. Is that right? Here's what I think you said. Is that right? So this is what I need to do. Is that right? Just to make sure. And so that's kind of what effective communication looks like when it's happening. Here's a stereotypical Southern NASCAR version of what it looks like when communication is not happening effectively. So that's kind of the joke around my house. I'm clueless most of the time, and I'll say, no, I honestly did not know that. And so that scene and the look on their faces there, Ricky Bobby's wife and his friend Cal, that's the look of ineffective communication. And so I would guess that most of you would say that you do a pretty good job of communicating with your employees or communicating with your contractors. And I wonder if your employees or contractors would say the same. Because many studies have shown that upper level managers and leaders consistently say that they do a good job of communicating. And then the researcher will flip it around and ask the employees, is the supervisor communicating well? And they give completely different answers. And so how would you know if you're not doing a good job communicating with your employees? And if you were able to know, would you do something about it? Would you change that? I hope that you would. So Peter Drucker, he says that communication is what the listener does. And so that's why I feel the weight of being a good listener. And I want to make sure that you know that I heard you and I understood you. But this note here that one of our neighbors left for us, and this is down a front slope across the ditch, out in the woods to the right-of-way fence. And one of our inspectors doing their job, they happen to see this note out there. But I wonder, if no one would have seen this note, really communication would not have happened. So if a message if you leave a message in the woods and no one's around to hear it, it's probably not going to make a sound. So there has to be a listener as a part of that component. So there's the why, the what. Now let's answer that harder question of how to make it happen. And this is accounting for all of our personal hangups and our limitations and all the distractions and the noise in our world. How can we make it happen? So I read one time this guy, Mark Baker, he said that the purpose of all communication is to change behavior. And to me, that sounded manipulative, that the only reason I would talk to you would be to change your behavior. But really, if you think about one of the reasons I might just casually talk to you is to build a connection with you or to strengthen a connection with you. And that's kind of about behavior. And so I can kind of buy into that a little bit. So if we're going to take that approach of my communication is an intentional thing, I'm trying to do something with it, we've got to ask ourselves some questions. Whose behavior am I trying to change? How do I want them to behave? And what can I say to them that will motivate them to behave this way? And so some of those images on this slide here, the top, that was a mandatory training that we held when I was at ALDOT. We had a super sensitive project, environmentally sensitive and politically sensitive and regulatorily sensitive. And we wanted our contractors to know exactly what's about to happen, what our expectations were, and why we were doing it. So we had a mandatory training for that. The bottom left there are regulators, our state regulator, Fish and Wildlife, Corps of Engineers, and we're trying to show them that we're doing a good job on this project, and the behavior we wanted them to back off or to leave us alone or not find us or whatever it may have been. Down on the lower right, that's similar. That's, by the way, if you ever see a guy in sandals, shorts, and a camera lens longer than his beard walking around on your project, it might be a bad thing, but I actually invited that river keeper to come to our project, and we're standing over a creek, looking at the drainage area or the results of a drainage area for one of our construction sites. And so I wanted him to behave himself, as he's blasting us on Facebook or wherever it might be. And I wanted to show him, hey, we are actually doing a good job. Same with the reporter there in the upper right. This is a group of a community outreach group for one of our projects. And John Maxwell again says, every time you speak to people, give them something to feel, something to remember, and something to do, again, about behavior. And so we volunteered, we invited them to tour our project. And I thought it would be fun to hop in a giant excavator bucket and get our picture made. And I sent that picture to all of them. And so I'm hoping that it built a connection. I'm hoping that they felt something when they left that project. They took something with them. And the behavior, community outreach group, we wanted them to be our advocates in the community and to bring us concerns. And so really just wanted them to feel like they were part of our team. That was the behavior, the something to do part of that. One key to understanding and response is accurate translation. And if I gave this presentation in Spanish, you would need a translator. Not because you don't know Spanish, but because I don't know Spanish. It would literally come out in gibberish, and you would have to work really hard to understand what I was trying to say. And I would have to work really hard to try to deliver my message. I actually had to look up the meaning of mahalo when I was invited to speak at this meeting last year. And so there is, the key to understanding and response is accurate translation. And so we listen to understand and we speak to be understood. Stephen Covey says that the key to accurate translation of effective two-way communication is high trust. So we're back around to trust again in our communication. So we choose to communicate to gain that trust, and we choose to trust in order so that we can better communicate. Let's see. I got off track there. So, communication, as you know, is more than just about specification language. That's a part of it. But this headline caught my attention some time back. It says, facts don't convince people in political arguments. Here's what does. And you could probably guess what does. It's really about story. And the article talked about, I guess the obvious was that people doubt political facts that are presented by their opponents far more than facts that are presented by someone that they agree with. And that's not surprising. What was a little bit surprising was that the studies also highlighted that people respect those that they disagree with more when their position comes from a place of personal experience, not facts or figures. And so me as an engineer and having that kind of personality, I want to lay all the facts and figures out in front of you to try to convince you, when in reality, if I can tell you a story about my experience, you're actually more likely to believe that, according to the studies in this article. And it said that was true, especially in moral disagreements, and that experience seemed truer than facts. So although people think they respect their opponents when they present the facts, they actually have more respect for them when they tell those personal stories. And ultimately, people can always come up with a way to doubt or discount the facts, but the personal stories are harder to argue away. So I've actually been telling you a story today. This framework here on the left side of the slide, this is a presentation framework that I stumbled on many years ago when I was working with a youth group at church. Some of the content that we had to go by, and there's actually a secret sauce to my storytelling, and I've tweaked it a little bit over the years, but this is what I use when I develop a presentation, and actually what I've used for this presentation. So in the introduction, I wanted to connect with you right off the bat. I shared with you that I struggle with communication, and I think that probably made you feel like we might have something in common. And I told you that even though it's hard for me, I still think it's valuable and necessary to be effective. And hopefully that was helpful. The tension, I tried to share some things that transitioned the story away from me and to us, to you, your organization, your projects. And the truth is that I shared, communication is required for effectiveness, and it doesn't happen on its own. And then I've given you several examples of how you can apply that in your work, and even right now. And I'm going through the landing right now, summing up the session and bringing this back to a personal experience. And part of the story I've been telling for many years, it's about getting better. It's about me getting better. It's about you getting better. And it's about change. I saw a cartoon this morning that said there were people sitting around the boardroom table, and somebody said, what if we don't change at all and then something magical just happens? But it doesn't happen that way. We have to affect change in the ways that we need to affect change. And one example, excellent example of leadership is the director of the Alabama Department of Transportation, John Cooper. Actually, when I was at ALDOT, I helped to create the ALDOT Leadership Academy. And as part of that, we interviewed current and former leaders at the DOT. And Mr. Cooper was one of those. And we asked him about affecting change. And this is what he had to say.
Barry, there is no audio.
Okay, I will tell you what Mr. Cooper said. So I guess you didn't hear Ricky Bobby earlier.
No.
Bummer. So Mr. Cooper said in just that short sound bite, he said that a few big things that we can take away. He said that change takes a commitment to change. And he said that commitment to change has to come from leadership. And he's a believer that leadership happens at any level of an organization, every level of an organization. And he also said that commitment has to be in the form that can be communicated and understood. And that's where managing communication comes into play. And I have run us short of time again, so I apologize for that. John, what kind of questions do we have right now? And these questions can be about the 5-pillar session earlier or about communication now. My email and phone number are on that slide. If we don't get to your question now, just shoot me a note. We'll catch up then.
Thank you, Barry, for the presentation. I'm going to open it up. I have not seen any questions right now. But again, as Barry said, if you have any on the previous session that Barry provided, as well as this one, please feel free to submit those right now. And you are on time, Barry. You're perfect timing.
Okay. I apologize about the videos. Mr. Cooper's a wise man that I've learned a lot from over the years. And pretty good clip there. And the Ricky Bobby, or the Ballad of Ricky Bobby movie clip, that was his friend Cal and his wife. His wife said, "Now, Ricky, you've known for we haven't been getting along for years, and this marriage was headed downhill. We all know that." And Ricky said, "No, I did not know that." So that's the joke. I'm sorry you guys didn't get to hear that.
All right, everyone, if there are no questions, probably get everybody out of here. Again, Barry, thank you so very much for participating in this POW conference. Some great information, especially on the communication. I think we all expect that we have those, qualities and capabilities, but when we really look hard at them, we all, I think, suffer from following a good path to lead to that. So I really do appreciate that. Again, the next session begins at 11. Please return to the sessions tab to see the next breakout sessions. Don't forget to take a look at the leaderboard to see if you are in the lead for that takeaway. If there's anything else, that is it. Mahalo to everybody that attended today. And again, Barry, thanks so much again.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.